Dude, where's the buses? Your school doesn't have buses. Wait, what? What do you mean our school doesn't have buses? Like, why? Well, a few school buses don't go to certain schools, and other school programs were reduced funding, which was a result of cuts to education. This resulted in many things, such as school buses being removed and students having to learn to take the transit. But the real question is, was it worth it? Our answer was no, and that opinion is what we're going to discuss with you today. So one thing is obviously job loss. The jobs were lost were mainly bus drivers and teachers. Now this put many people out of their jobs. But we can't forget that Remy Modern also created jobs when it was built. There's still the problem of the people who lost their jobs, the people driving the buses, and the teachers had a high chance of not being able to be hired at work at the Remy Modern. Also, many people loved their jobs already. Not to mention, people had families to feed on. The small chance that they actually did get a job at the Remy Modern, they would still be out of commission until the art gallery actually opened up many weeks later, meaning they could not get the money they needed in that time. And this made people a bit angry. I have an idea. Interview a vice principal and see what he thinks. Yeah, let's go.
Hello.
Hi guys.
So, our names are Daniel, and his name's Sammy.
Nice to meet you. My name is Brett, and I'm a teacher and a vice principal at Delisle Composite School in the Prairie Sprayed School Division, so just outside of Saskatoon.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Questions today?
Absolutely.
Why is adequate funding important to schools, and what do we use educational funding for?
Well, it's really important to make sure that schools are funded adequately because it's investment in our future. It's really important that we as a society are learning as much as we can, growing as much as we can, so that we can create better opportunities for everybody, not just people that can afford it. So that's part of the backbone of public education, is to make sure that everybody gets a chance to learn and everybody gets a chance to succeed in life. And that's why it's really important that schools are funded adequately. Where that funding goes to, there's a lot of different factors in play. Teacher salaries is a big one. Books, technology, things like that. Supports for students, people like EAs who are super important to help kids learn and to help support kids in their learning. All sorts of different schooling or learning activities, field trips, things like that. So,
What kind of programs are important to schools across Saskatchewan right now?
you know what? One big one with our changing demographics in the province and the people moving here from other places is English as additional language programs. Those are incredibly important so that teachers can help support the students, the newcomers to Canada, and support them in their learning. In the school that I work at right now, one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with is mental health. And so I'd say that that's probably one of the most important ones. We've got a lot of kids that are struggling, not just in my school, but from the sounds of it in a lot of other schools. So we need to make sure that these kids are taken care of, and we need to make sure that they're supported, not just in their learning at school, but in their lives, so that they're not, so that they can be healthy and live their best lives.
And follow-up question.
Yep.
Do different grades, do they have different needs?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. We see in my school division, we have a lot of schools that do breakfast programs. So kids that they come to school and they'll get like a muffin and a juice or something like that. Whereas in the older grades in certain high schools, you maybe wouldn't see that as much. Whereas in the younger school or in the younger grades, mental health issues aren't such a big deal, like I was just talking about. So, just with that alone, it would have differences. Also with things like transportation, you guys were talking to me about before about transportation. A 18-year-old, it's a little easier for him or her to get to school than it is on their own than it is for a 8-year-old, right? So it's really important that transportation gets the younger kids to school. It's important for all of the kids, but it's easier to tell an 18-year-old that they can find their own way to school than it is to tell an 8-year-old that, for sure. So definitely, you look at different grades differently, absolutely.
So why is taking the bus important to students and teachers alike?
Well, I think it's important that kids have the opportunity to be at school, and so we need to, as a society, we need to remove as many barriers for that to happen as possible, right? So you were talking before about how tough it is to take a bus to the school that you go to. That should never stop kids from getting to school, right? It should never be a problem for kids to get to school. It's hard. School is hard enough, right? Life is hard enough without having to worry about how you're going to get to school. So it's definitely something that needs to be considered. I teach in a rural school, so it's a little bit different than in Saskatoon, but some of my students ride the bus for an hour just to get to school every day, right? Because they're 50 kilometers away from the school and things like that. So busing is hugely important in the school that I work in, for sure.
So how is transit busing different from school-provided busing?
That's a really good question. I would say that the funding for it is a big difference. So in the transit, like in the transit-provided busing, kids would probably have to pay for it themselves, I'm assuming. So the parents would pay for the kids' bus passes and things like that. Whereas school-provided busing, the school division pays for it, so that's a huge burden off of the parents. Like we have a lot of kids in our province whose parents are struggling to make ends meet, so it's to ask them to pay another $50 a month or whatever it is for a bus pass. That's $50 that could be going towards clothing or food or things like that. So it's really important that our government helps these parents out as much as they can, so that we can get these kids to school, so that they can help our society.
Should educational funding be the most important issue for our government, and why or why not?
I definitely think that it should. I'm a little bit biased being a teacher, thinking that it's the most important, but recently in the past 10 years or so, we've seen our government try to work towards saving money, and one of the things that they're trying to save money in is education. But I think that's having negative impact on our students. I think that we're seeing students losing EA support and things like that, not having the technology that we need in the classroom. So we're trying to prepare you guys for a world in which technology is everywhere, but if you don't have the chance to work with that at school, then we're not really preparing you for that, right? So I think as a society and as a province, we need to decide if we want good education or if we want cheap education, because I think we can do it cheaper, but it's not going to be very good for students. It's not going to get students the skills and the knowledge that they need to make our world a better place, which is what we want from our kids, right? So I think we as a society, as a province, we need to invest more into education so that our kids can be better. Like the next generations coming up can do a better job of our province than past generations, and help us grow and learn and just really be the best that we can be. So none of that's going to happen without money, right? None of that's going to happen unless our government decides that this is the most important thing, and I really think it is. And if you think of the industries in our province, things like oil and uranium and potash, there's incredibly smart people driving those industries, right? And none of those people would have that knowledge without school. So our province would not be the place that it is without the education that we have. And so we need to make sure that we keep that going. We need to make sure that our schools are properly funded, that all kids have the opportunity to get to school and to learn at a very high level, so that we can lead the nation, lead the world in our education.
So thank you for coming here today.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Learned a lot as well.
Good, I hope so. Thank you guys.
Oh, that's why. Hey, why doesn't this ward have any sidewalk ramps?
Well,